So, welcome back to another episode of Everything Aviation Podcast. It's not every day that you get to interview one of your aviation inspirations and heroes, but today I get to. This man has a phenomenal aviation career and it is growing by the second. Qualified flying instructor straight out of training, Tornado F3 pilot, longest serving Red Arrows pilot in history. He's also a member of the Blades Aerobatic team and awarded an MBE and soloed a Spitfire. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Mike Ling. Mike, how are we?
I'm good, Mikey. Thank you. Yeah, that's it's quite. I like the introduction. Thank you very much.
No problems at all. We don't usually get to talk to someone who's done all that, so I thought I have to get it all out there.
Oh, it's I'm very, very proud of what I've achieved, and well, looking forward to what hopefully after all this coronavirus rubbish goes away, what we can do in the future.
It'd be really interesting. I was going to say, because if you've done all that, you've definitely got so much more to come.
Well, yeah, I think there are certain things I want to try and achieve, certainly before I lose my medical rating and I'm too old to fly. So yeah, watch this space.
Brilliant. Mike, I'm gonna start off with what I ask everyone who comes on this channel is, where did your interest in flying come from?
Well, I grew up in Biggin Hill in Kent, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners will know was a very famous Battle of Britain station. So just on the outskirts of London. I was born and bred there. My family weren't from the military. My grandfather was aircrew in the Second World War, Lancasters, but he qualified at the very end of the war. In fact, May 1945. So the very end, just around the VE day, is when he got his qualification on the Lancaster on 49 Squadron. So he then took part in a lot of the missions afterwards, flying the Lancaster. So mainly the repatriation of prisoner of war from Italy.
Oh, wow.
So Operation Dodge and Operation Exodus, flying over picket in Lancasters that were stripped out. They put a load of POWs down the back and flew them back. So he took part in those. He never actually dropped a bomb in anger, from what I can gather from his logbook. But so he was a big inspiration, just listening to some of his stories. Sadly, he's no longer with us. But then being in Biggin Hill, every year there's an air show. Aviation was always rife at Biggin Hill. It was fantastic to see. It was still an active RAF base while I was growing up. There were no flying units there, but it was the Officer and Air Crew Selection Centre. So the village, the town was, there was RAF life, if you like. And every time you went past the station, you'd see guys on the gate with guns. And it was just something that I thought was very intriguing, very interesting. And then going to the air show every year was really where I caught the bug and fell in love with aeroplanes. And that was really where I had the interest in becoming a pilot.
Fantastic. And then I take it that your interest in joining the RAF came from like your granddad, and also living near an RAF base, which was Biggin Hill at the time.
Yeah, that was exactly it. And as soon as I was eligible, I joined the Air Training Corps. So I became an air cadet, must have been around 13 straight away, and just fell in love with that as well. Became a very active member of Biggin Hill Squadron Air Training Corps, and just loved it. The opportunities that organization provides is really incredible, and is a very good stepping stone to joining the real Royal Air Force.
It's brilliant. I'm a civilian instructor with a 172 Squadron, Hayward Heath, and I have to say it's fantastic, and seeing what the cadets get to do and what their opportunities are is absolutely amazing as well. So I know exactly where you're coming from there.
Yeah, it's definitely a part of it shaped my teenage years, and then, as I said before, it was a definite brilliant springboard into becoming a Royal Air Force officer.
Brilliant. So when did you actually apply for the RAF?
I was, I would have been 16, I guess, when I applied for a sixth form scholarship and a flying scholarship. So the way the scholarships used to work is you would go through the normal selection process that you would be to apply to join to be a pilot. And then at the end of that, they would tell you if you were successful for either the sixth form scholarship or the flying scholarship. Sadly, I didn't get the sixth form scholarship, but I did get a flying scholarship, which was brilliant because at the time it gave 20 hours of flying in a single engine piston aeroplane towards PPL, which was great. So at 17, in fact, I think I was just 18 actually, I went to Manston in Kent and flew a Cessna for 20 hours. It was a really good thing to be given by the Air Force, and a great privilege.
I was going to say that's just really, really cool, especially coming from what you want to go on to do. So to them to recognize you at that young age of your abilities must have felt really good, knowing that that's what you wanted to go on to do.
Yeah, and the best bit about it, I thought, was that you'd been through most or part of the selection process. So when you went to apply to join for real, you kind of knew what to expect from those aspects because you'd been through it for the scholarship. So it was a slightly watered down version of the selection process for a scholarship, but you still did a lot of the main exercises that you would do then later for main selection.
Ah, brilliant. Okay, so it got a really nice insight, but also showed then that you were keen and interested. And I take
Exactly.
it went towards your application also when you went in and said, "Oh, I've been awarded a scholarship."
Yeah, obviously they've got your name on record, so they've seen how you performed at that first selection process, and then how you performed on your scholarship as well. That was all very carefully monitored by the flying training organisations, and then that then came into your selection. They had it on your file, and they would look through and see what how you performed and what you were like in your previous selection. So yeah, it did all add up.
Brilliant. So after that, you've had to go and to become a air crewman in the RAF. You have to become an officer first. Tell us a bit about the officer training.
Yeah, that is. Do you know what? This is really bizarre. It's a 6-month course, and I don't have any really strong memories about officer training. Really bizarre. I was 19, so it's just after my 19th birthday that I started officer training at Cranwell. I was the youngest on the course, so I think there were 130 of us or something. I was the youngest on the
Wow.
course as a direct entry aircrew or pilot entrant. The way it worked back in the day was depending on what time of year you started officer training, depended on how many people were on each course. So, for example, I started in May when the universities hadn't graduated, so there weren't that many youngsters, or for that matter, pilot trainees on my course. I think there were only 7 pilot candidates.
Oh,
Whereas the
wow.
following course, after universities had graduated a few months later, was full of pilot trainees. So I was very lucky in that most of my course, a lot of my course, were what we call ex-rankers. So people who were already in the Royal Air Force as non-commissioned personnel, who were going through their commissioning process. So they were going through officer training, having already served. And what that meant was you could then lean on their experience. You could really gain from what they'd learned, and they could teach you all of the whys and wherefores of what it was like to be in the Royal Air Force. And they were brilliant mentors. And I was very grateful. You know, I shared a room with a guy that was probably in his, I was 19. He was probably in his early 30s, and he'd already served, quite a few years in the Air Force and was commissioning. So he was brilliant. He took me under his wing and looked after me and helped me out and put me on the straight and narrow.
Brilliant. Because I was going to say, it must be daunting when you're going in at 19 as well, and then to get there and find out that you're the youngest on the course is also. It must. Do you feel like you've got something to prove to the rest of them?
I didn't ever feel like I had something to prove. I was there to get the qualification and to move on and try and realize the dream that I'd had since I was very young. So I didn't feel I had anything to prove to anybody else other than myself, in that I wanted to do as best I could on the course, and obviously learn what they were going to teach you, because that was very relevant to what you were going to go and do in your career as a commissioned officer.
Brilliant. And then you passed out as an ex-commissioned officer. How long was it till you took up a flying post?
The way it worked then, it was a 6-month flying course. Now this was in the late 90s. So at the time, the RAF was very short of pilots. So there were quite a few pilots going through, albeit not on my course because of the time of year, but there were tens and tens of them on the following course. So there were lots of students going through flying training. There weren't very long holds. So holding periods are when there's not a space for you on a course. You have to go and do another job as what's called a holding officer. I was very fortunate. My first job, I only got a 3-month hold. So out of officer training, I went straight to be the holding officer on what was then the Harrier Operational Conversion Unit.
Oh, wow.
So 20 Squadron, yeah, which was fantastic. It was RAF Wittering, which at the time had a frontline squadron and the conversion unit right next to Stamford in Rutland, so southern edge of Lincolnshire. Amazing base with 2 Harrier squadrons. There were another 2 up the road at Cottesmore. You'd go into Stamford, and it would just be. It used to be called RAF Stamford because everyone from Wittering was there, and you could just meet these Harrier pilots. And yeah, these are guys that I could really look up to.
Brilliant.
Working on the squadron was great, and yeah, I got lucky enough to have a backseat ride or 2 in a Harrier, which was very good. So the first RAF flight I took was in the back of a Harrier.
That's so cool, and I'd say that spurred you on then a bit as well, knowing that you were going on to fast jets.
Yeah, well, at the time I didn't know that because I hadn't done my elementary flying training. So after that 3-month hold, then I went to Church Fenton, as was. So it's now Leeds East Airport in Yorkshire, and flew the Firefly, the Slingsby Firefly, which was the elementary flying training course. And it was how well you performed on that course which determined whether you were going to go and fly fast jets, rotary aircraft, or multi-engined aircraft. So at that point, I didn't know I was going to be a fast jet pilot, but you're right. It did definitely make me see even more that I wanted to achieve this and be a fast jet pilot. So yeah, work as hard as you possibly could on that course. And then hopefully if you cut the mustard, then you would end up flying fast jets.
Brilliant. And did you ever cross your mind of maybe wanting to fly helicopters or transport?
I'll be totally honest with you, it didn't, because my ultimate goal, while I was still taking very small steps to get there, was to be in the Red Arrows. So, and you can't do that if you've been a rotary pilot or a multi-engine pilot. So my ultimate goal was to be in the Red Arrows, and to achieve that, I had to be in fast jets. So luckily, I got streamed to fast jets after the Firefly course, and off I went to Linton on the Tucano.
Brilliant. And then once you finished the Tucano, did you go on then to do a conversion course onto the Hawk at all?
Yes, indeed. So I did it's about a 10-month course on the Tucano. I had a very short hold of about I think it was only 2 weeks actually, between the Tucano course and the Hawk course, where I went and became the holding officer on the Battle of Britain Memorial flight. So that was fantastic as well. And then I went across to RAF Valley and started my Hawk training. So I actually got my wings on the Hawk. So up until around, blimey, show me age now, probably about 15 years ago, if not before then, you actually got wings on the Hawk at Valley as a fast jet pilot, but they brought it forward. So now students get their wings at the end of the basic flying training course.
Brilliant. And did you find the Tucano was a good kind of introduction aircraft to come from, say, what you were flying a Cessna, then onto a fast jet such as the Hawk?
I love the Tucano. It was a brilliant all-round airplane. You know, I flew one all the way to Malta and back. It was you could take it up to 24,000 feet. It would fly at 300 knots, so it wasn't the fastest airplane in the world, but it was fast enough to have some good fun at low level. It was reasonably good at aerobatics. You could do inverted spinning in it. The good thing about Tucano is you could actually land in relatively short airfields. So somewhere where a Hawk would be able to get, for example, somewhere like Oban in Scotland, you'd never get a Hawk in there because the runway's not long enough, but you could put a Tucano in there, had reverse thrust, and it had with propeller and the turboprop, it actually had quite a lot of performance for getting in and out of those places. So I went to some places in a Tucano where you wouldn't dream of taking a fast jet to. So I had a great time flying it, and I really enjoyed the airplane.
Brilliant. And your Hawk experience then how did you find that then from the Tucano? Because like you said, you couldn't get into small strips and that, but was it equally as fun to fly and kind of gave you an idea of what you were hoping to go on to afterwards?
It certainly did. The Hawk is a sports car. It is definitely one of my top 5 favorite airplanes to fly. It does what you tell it to do. It's designed, the T1, which was what I trained on then, and then the Red Arrows fly. It's so simple. It's reliable. It's relatively good performance. It's not blessed with masses of performance, so the power to weight ratio isn't brilliant. But for what we were using it for basic or for advanced flying training, and for what the Red Arrows use, it's a brilliant airplane. The biggest thing during training is that you see this aircraft for the first time. So you go from your Firefly to the Tucano, you think, wow, this Tucano is huge. You know, this is going to be such a different beast to fly. Then you go from the Tucano to the Hawk, and it's even bigger, and you think, wow, this is just incredible. And then you go from the Hawk to the Tornado, which is just another league. The size of it is just out of this world in comparison. So that's the biggest thing about flight training, is that at each stage, you know, you're going up a gear in terms of speed, but also just in terms of size and complexity of each of the aircraft. So that was the biggest thing I found about the Hawk, is you get to it, it's big. You know, you're wearing G-suit, you're wearing an immersion suit at Valley, because it's an island and you've got to fly over the sea a lot, so you wear an immersion suit. So it all feels very relatively alien to start with. It's pressurized, so you can go up to 50,000 or 45,000 feet in a Hawk. Whereas you can't do that in Tucano. So quite a few differences with it. And of course, you haven't got a big propeller wearing on the front, which is the other thing. You know, in a Hawk, the visibility out the front is quite a stubby nose. So you really can't see a huge amount other than the instruments in front of you and then the horizon out the window. So yeah, quite a big step from the Tucano to the Hawk. But it was such an enjoyable step. You know, you're flying an airplane now, you're at low level at 420 knots instead of 240 knots. So it is a considerable jump in terms of what you're learning and the pace at which you're learning. And of course, you're then starting to introduce quite a few tactics into the course. So not just about how do you fly an airplane, how do you learn to fly formation in a Tucano. This is now, right, how do I learn to fly a Hawk as a weapons platform in a tactical environment? And that was the really interesting part of that whole course.
Brilliant. And did you do any of that with the Tucano at all, or was the Tucano just literally teaching you how to do engine management with it, and then aerobatics and getting you ready for the Hawk, or was everything weapon?
The Tucano course was very much geared to just very small steps into you becoming a more experienced, rounded operator. You did a little bit of tactical flying, something called fighting wing at the time. They've introduced a few more tactical aspects to it, but at the time it was you were being taught how to be a relatively simple formation leader and formation wingman. but not a huge amount of tactical learning. That all came a bit later on the Hawk, and then eventually the operational conversion unit. Well, after tactical weapons training, onto the conversion unit on the front line.
Brilliant. Going back to the size of the hawk you were saying, being from Ireland, we hadn't seen anything like that. So the first time I ever saw a hawk, we were on a visit at RAF Valley, and it was huge. I thought it was like a little sports car, and then I seen it up front, like you were saying, it was huge. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, it is. But then it pales into insignificance when you put it next to a tornado.
I was watching the Red Hours documentary there as well, where they went across to the US, and even as well, they're huge, and you see it sat beside an A400 or something. You think, nah, it is really a sports car.
It's crazy. Yeah. When you fly, I'm trying to think of the biggest thing I flew. Probably a 747 in the Red Arrows on the wing of a 747 or the Vulcan, and it just the airplane becomes dwarfed.
So you came out then of your pilot training, you got your wings in the Hawk. At what point did they tell you you were now becoming a creamy flight instructor?
That was at that point. So what would happen at the time is you do the advanced flying training on what was 208 Squadron. So the learning how to fly the Hawk with a little bit of tactical flying. Then you get your wings, then you would progress to your attack weapons flying, still flying the T1. But there's also a point where if you get your wings, some people become what's known as creamy instructors. Now, the idea of creamies was it was those who had shown certain attributes throughout their training. They were deemed suitable to go back and be instructors straight from their training. So the cream on top of the milk is what I think was what it was meant to signify. But I certainly wouldn't put myself in that bracket. But it was the option was you could either stay at Valley and be a creamy instructor on the Hawk, or you could go back to the Tucano and be a creamy instructor on the Tucano. Just depended on where the need was and perhaps what your the way they deemed your possible instructional technique, whether it would be better suited to the Tucano course or to the Hawk course. And for me, it was deemed that I would be better on the Tucano. So off I went back to Linton-on-Ouse. So having spent 6 months on Anglesey on the Hawk, it was back to do the Central Flying School course at Linton-on-Ouse and start learning to be an instructor on the Tucano. And
did it take long to get used to the Tucano again?
Not at all, no. Because by the time you finish the course, I think you've got about 140 hours of flying the Tucano, and of course that's all front seat. That's all in the front seat, actually doing the flying. Then you go and put it in the Hawk. When you then go back to the Tucano, actually the beauty of it is that you've been, as I said before, you've been doing low level at 420 knots. Now you're back to 240 knots. So it taught you or given you a little bit of extra capacity and thinking time. So that sort of step back to go down a gear was actually quite useful for then learning to add the instructional aspects on top.
And at the age of 22, how did you feel going into an instructor's role? Because that's still quite young.
It was, yeah. So I got creamed off when I was 21 and then qualified when I was 22, which was brilliant because I mentioned before about those university students who had graduated, and a lot of those guys and girls had already done some of their flying training through the university air squadrons, but they were going through the Tucano course and were a similar age, because they'd been to university and I hadn't. They were about 21, 22, 23, and therefore the same age as I was as an instructor. And it was great. I've got some lifelong friends now who I taught to fly because I was at the same time at Linton, at the same time when they were students, I was instructors. In fact, a good story about that is when I mentioned before about being in the Air Cadets at Biggin Hill. The guy I joined with, who was in my class at school, we joined the Air Cadets together, both wanted to be pilots. He actually went off to university while I joined the Air Force. He got a first in physics from Oxford and he was senior student on the UES. He was pretty switched on cookie. But he joined the Air Force to become a pilot. And the timing worked out that I then taught him how to fly. Because he became one of my students. And that was quite a nice sort of rounded story as to the different paths people take, either go to university or not. And quite often that's a question I get asked is it worth going to university? And the answer is not necessarily. The skills, some of the skills that the Air Force want you to have as a pilot, nothing at university will teach you that, but they might want you to have a little bit more maturity or be a little bit more rounded before you come in. So it all depends on the individual, in true honesty.
Sorry, carry on.
That was just a nice rounded story, but that was in answer to your question. It was being 22 as an instructor. It's quite a lot of responsibility, and but by the same token, you're engaging with people the same age as you, and I found that quite easy to hopefully they would say the same. I found it quite easy to sort of impart my knowledge onto these guys and girls that were really my peers and in my age group.
I love hearing the stories as well about people who haven't gone to university. I haven't gone to university myself, but my school, it was great, but it didn't really entertain the idea. I wanted to go into the Royal Navy at the time, and they didn't really entertain the idea of not going to uni or college as we had in Ireland. So it's great to hear someone like yourself who's had such a successful career, who didn't choose that university path. And it's not for everyone, but if you want to do it, fair play. But it's great to hear someone like yourself, who hasn't done it, who's gotten so far in their career.
Yeah, so my best friend, who is now a group captain, actually. So I think he's even younger than me. He was also a Tucano creamie, so he got creamed off just after me, was probably a year younger than me. He then became a Harrier pilot. He was then most recently the boss of 617 Squadron. So he was a wing commander boss of 617 Squadron at well, it must have been just probably late 30s. Wow. And he's now a group captain at just 40. So he's doing very well. But it just goes to show, as you say, you don't have to go to university to be able to succeed in some of the places that the Royal Air Force wants you to succeed.
It's brilliant, especially because you see like recruitment these days, everyone's like, oh, you need a degree, this and that. And that's what I loved about the military as well, was they didn't care. Once you could show the attributes to do the job and go and do it, they really did not mind.
Exactly that. And what is very good about the military is that there are so many opportunities if time permits, and that's normally the biggest problem, is that you're just too busy to fit anything in, but they will give you vocational qualifications while you're training. So I had opportunities to do degree courses, but trying to do that whilst home life balance, work life balance is difficult at the best of times. So trying to fit in a degree as well. I did start one, but unfortunately I couldn't see it through with the commitments I had.
I was going to say, going back to your career, I don't think you needed it really.
It would be nice to have, just to prove that it's not just all about flying. There are some vocational qualifications to be had as well.
So how long then were you, going back to the Tucano, how long then were you an instructor on that before you got told you're moving on to the Tornado?
I think it was 3 years as an instructor. There are varying levels of instructor. So you start off as what's known as a B2, which is almost like a probational level instructor. Then you become a B1 instructor after a certain number of months, which means you can teach different levels, you can do different tests on students. And then the above average level is A2, and then the exceptional level is A1. There are very few A1 instructors, but I managed to get my A2 instructor qualification, which was hard work. That was a very, very trying course, because this is the Central Flying School. It's the oldest flying school in the world. They expect their instructors to be of a certain pedigree, and they wouldn't just give a willy-nilly A2 out to anybody. So it was quite hard work. It was 2 weeks of intense flying, teaching on the ground, and then a big test at the end of it, which was very daunting. And I have to admit, I didn't actually do very well at it. Did all right in the air and the actual instructional aspects, but the ground school quiz that I got afterwards was, I have to admit, pretty dire. But luckily I scraped through it and I got my A2. And it was after that, I still hadn't done the weapons course at this point.
Oh, okay.
So that second course I was talking about, so I had to go and do that. So I went back to Valley, learnt, refreshed on the Hawk, so get qualified again on the T1. But at this time, because the Air Force was so short of pilots and the flying training system was quite clogged, there were too many students, not enough flying training assets. We actually bought into the NATO flying training course out in Canada. So I elected to go to Canada for about 8 months and flew a more digital version of the Hawks, called the Hawk 115, which is a bit like the T2. So it's a sort of rudimentary early version of what the Air Force has now. This was a glass cockpit, multi-function, hands-on throttle and stick, quite a different league to the T1, where when I learned to fly the T1, it's different now, but they didn't even have a GPS. You did everything with your map and your stopwatch, and what's known as TACAN. So beacons for navigating, military beacons for navigating. And you had to triangulate your position using 2 TACANs. It was quite hard work when you're doing 7 miles a minute. But now they have a GPS bolted in, so it makes it a little bit easier. But the Hawk 115 out in Canada was very different. The whole thing was head-up display, information screens down here, and computers that told you what you were doing, what weapon systems you had. So it was much better in terms of relevance for moving on to a frontline platform in terms of cockpit management, but not as probably not as difficult a course as it was at Valley, where you had nothing but your map and stopwatch. But yeah, 8 months in Canada, which was fantastic.
It sounds like it's fantastic, especially getting to fly a different variant to what you're used to as well. So I always love that when I fly something different and it goes in the logbook. And I'm like, well, hey, look at that, it's in there. I can put it on.
Yeah, a different type. Yeah, but the good thing about that course as well is because it was the NATO flying training course, there were students from all over NATO and beyond NATO. In fact, I mean, there were some Singaporean students, there were some Hungarian students, Italians, obviously Canadians. Some instructors were from Germany, so it was a real cross section of different caliber pilots around the world, and really good to meet lifelong friends again who were doing the same course, and we're going to go back to their respective nations and fly different things.
And I have to ask, because I've always wondered this question: when you are navigating by map in a Hawk, you're going so fast, it must be really tough to figure out. It's gone. There's that lake. It's gone again.
Yeah, indeed, and there are definite techniques to low level navigation. Be that in a Cessna 150 when you're doing 90 knots, to a Tucano where you're doing 240 knots, to a Hawk where you're doing 420, to a Tornado where you're doing potentially 550 knots. There are different techniques to how you do navigating. And the thing to do is actually just pick big features for navigation, fly to something that's got a vertical extent where you can see it in the distance, you can fly towards it, you trust your planning, you trust where you are on the map, look at the stopwatch, and that if you fly the right speed on the right heading or the right track, then you're going to be in the ballpark when you get to your next turning point. So it was all about technique, and that was what we tried to elicit to the students was you learn the technique. You don't learn to map read as you're flying at 7 miles a minute. It is impossible.
I did think that, because I fly little Icarus C42 microlights at the moment, and just like navigating that, if you go into the Isle of Wight, you could spot the Isle of Wight half an hour before you get to it. And then I always thought, when you hear of documentaries and stuff, that the Hawks don't have any GPS, and I always wondered, I couldn't imagine sitting there covering that speed, going, oh no, yeah, I think it's gone now. That's
but actually, your mental dead reckoning. So your MDI, if you remember, when you do it in your Icarus or a Cessna, because you're going so slow, the wind affects you an awful lot more. Percentage wise, your drift, your ground speed, it changes a lot more at those sort of speeds than it does at 420 knots. Your maximum drift at 420 knots is very different to your maximum drift at 90 knots or 70 knots. So actually, your mental dead reckoning becomes easier the faster you're going. But obviously you're covering a lot more ground, and you can get yourself into a pickle a lot quicker than you would at 70 knots or 90 knots. That's the real thing to come to grips with.
And did you find, when on the Tornado, did you find it any harder to get your head around because you're doing a quicker speed than the Hawk and it's a bigger aircraft? Did you find it more difficult to get your head around at all, or?
Not really. The thing when you go to the front line is that now you do have these navigation systems. In a Tornado, you've actually got a navigator in the back as well who is there monitoring all the systems as well. You've got many more things to think about. So now the airplane you're flying is a weapons platform. Your job is to, if you're a ground attack pilot, your job is to get a bomb on a target at a certain time. That is your job. You use the airplane to make that happen. If you're an air defense pilot, you use your airplane to defend a piece of airspace or to defend another asset. The airplane is not about accurate flying per se anymore. It's about accurate prosecution of the mission. And that's the big step change when it comes to getting to the front line and flying that frontline type. So yes, it is a very different mindset in terms of you're still low level at 420 knots in a Tornado, but it's a very different job that you're doing now. You're not just getting from A to B, you're getting from A to B for a reason.
Brilliant. And how long were you on the Tornado then before you became a conversion? Was it conversion instructor you were on it?
That was let me think about this. I think the course for the Tornado was about 6 months. So January 2005 to July 2005. That was the conversion course. So you do your initial learn how to fly the airplane with a few tactics thrown in on a conversion course. At the end of that, you become what's known as limited combat ready. That was certainly with the Tornado F3 that I flew, the air defense variant. Then when you go to the squadron, you do another bit of a workup, which is your frontline conversion workup. And at the end of that, you're assessed as being combat ready if you pass that conversion. Right. So I'd probably spent a year on the squadron as a combat ready pilot before I then became a combat instructor.
Okay, and was it the instructor course any different to the instructor courses that you'd done already?
Well, there wasn't really a course, to be honest with you. It
All
was
right.
just a case of you have been an instructor in the past, so you were a qualified instructor. You are now frontline. You've got enough experience as a four-ship leader. You've got enough experience to put a junior navigator in the back and teach them how we do it on the front line. That was the idea of being a combat instructor. So it wasn't, there was no set qualification or a course to achieve a qualification, because I was already a qualified flying instructor. I had that instructor tick. I could then teach on the front line to these junior navigators.
And while you were doing in the tornado instruction, was that like a secondary duty? Were you still doing QRA or anything like that?
Absolutely, yeah. No, it was all part of frontline life. So, one day you might be doing QRA, the next day you were teaching a navigator, the next day you're preparing for an exercise, then you'd be the next month you're down in the Falkland Islands or in Europe or the Middle East or America on exercise. So yeah, it was quite a busy time on the front line, and I know the pace is no different today on the Typhoon and Lightning squadrons. The guys and girls are very, very busy.
Did you deploy anywhere with the tornadoes at all?
I didn't deploy in the sense of go out to any theatre where there were hostile action, just because the F3 was air defence, and at the time, so we're talking now 2005 to 2007, there was no call for the F3 to be in theatre. What it did do, though, the primary role was air defence of the UK and the Falkland Islands. So you were on, the force was at readiness 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and that is what the force primary role was, to be UK and Falkland Islands air defence. I did an awful lot of that, and then I did a lot of exercises. India, Hungary, Denmark, Belgium. Was meant to be in the States, was meant to be in the UAE, but they're long stories. Meant I didn't quite get there. But yeah, so I did some good exercises, but primarily it was all about air defence of the UK.
Right, and that classified as a combat role, more or less, because I know to get into Red Arrows, you had to have at least one tour de duty under your belt. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, people often think a tour of duty means be deployed to a theatre. Actually, that's not the case. You just have to have been on the front line. Now, at the time, the Tornado F3 was declared as a part of the NATO Readiness Force, so it was a frontline unit. I was on a frontline squadron. We had a frontline role in their defence. So yeah, I had completed a frontline tour. I just hadn't been deployed to anywhere where it was rather hostile.
And because how long did you do on the Tornado in total?
In total, it was probably about 2.5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so I joined in sort of January 2005, and I went to the Red Arrows in July 2007. So 2.5 years, I'd say, was my total time on the Tornado. I didn't do a huge amount of flying in it. I think I only got around just under 500 hours. So there are some guys out there who've got 4,000 hours in the Tornado F3. So it certainly wasn't anywhere near that. But in 2.5 years, it was quite a good stat. I had quite a few qualifications on the jet before I then went across to be in the Red Arrows.
I think that's funny you say I haven't got much flying on at 500 hours. In nearly 8 years of having the license, I'm just coming up on 200 hours.
Yeah, but it's, this is where I find myself very fortunate being a military pilot. I've got a lot of friends who are PPL holders. It's all self-funded flying. It's an expensive hobby, isn't it? I mean, it is ridiculous. And it's not just the expense, you're quite limited when you're a PPL holder into what you can do. It has to be a pretty nice day for you to go and fly it. Yeah. You've got to find someone who's got an airplane you can hire. There's obviously a lot of cost in that. It's to keep the thing current costs enough money to then to add on top things you want to do with the license. The bills just rack up and up and up. So I'm very fortunate to have had all that experience in the military to give me the flying.
And then, so you've done your 500 hours and your 2.5 years, and you're thinking, what point now is your brain starting to think, I want a red flight suit?
Well, to be honest with you, I mean, it had been since I was sort of 3 years old that I wanted to be in a red flight suit. So it had gone way, way back. My whole time as being an instructor on the Tucano, this was something that I wanted to achieve. I was telling my bosses that I really wanted to be in the Red Arrows when I grew up. That was something that I'd always put on my appraisal every year. So on the front line, I made it known to my boss, who incidentally was an ex-Red Arrow, I want to be in the Red Arrows, and he was almost my mentor and champion, if you like, for steering me down what I should do on the front line and when I should apply and what I should do. So yeah, very grateful to him.
Brilliant. And did you find it all when you said it to people, anyone kind of snubbed you out over it, or was everyone quite supportive? Because you hear about people kind of coming out for the Marines and stuff who want to go for SES and SBS selection, and when they say it to their commanding officers or their sergeants, they get laughed at, and it's like, oh, I'll see you back in a week. Did you find any of that when you were coming through?
I didn't personally experience any of that, but probably in the late 90s and 2000s, the Red Arrows didn't have the best reputation within the Royal Air Force. You know, they weren't viewed in a very good light by quite a few people. Now, I personally didn't experience it, but that was personally, I think, pretty misinformed. You know, the reputation was misinformed, I think. But then when I said I wanted to do it, I didn't get any stick from anybody for wanting to do it, because I think secretly there were a lot of guys that wanted to do it as well, but just didn't want to stick their head above the parapet and say they were going to do it, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I think I didn't personally experience it, but I know certainly some guys did.
And what's the application process for the Red Arrows like? Talk us through what you had to do from start till before you got told, yes, you're in on the team.
Well, the criteria you need to achieve before you can even think about applying. So 1,500 hours flying. Fast jet is really the bottom line, but instruction hours on the Tucano counted because it was instructional and you're flying, you know, single seat-esque flying, but you're also getting a lot of experience in different aspects of aviation, if you like. So 1,500 hours of flying, assessed as above average, completed a frontline tour, and be a flight lieutenant. So those 4 things, once you've achieved all those, then you can apply to join. Now, this is back in the day, so mid 2000s. I probably got a couple of thousand hours, and it was time for me to apply. Nowadays, to get that sort of level of flying takes quite a bit longer, just because of the nature of how the Royal Air Force is made up now, and a lot of simulator flying. You know, in the Typhoon and the F-35, a lot of it is now simulator based. So getting to that hours level is becoming increasingly more difficult. The other thing is, if you've got 1,500 hours, you're above average, and you've done a frontline tour, quite likely you're on the cusp of promotion to squadron leader, at which point you're ineligible to apply. So a lot of guys and girls now they're finding a difficult decision. You know, do they strive for promotion and progress further up the rank structure, or do they give it their shot to join the Red Arrows? And that's becoming more and more popular, or certainly more prevalent in the last few years that I was involved in the process.
Okay, so I didn't know that now. I did, because I know yourself, you reached the rank of squadron leader. So I didn't know that. Obviously, you were in before you reached that. So I didn't realize that you weren't allowed to apply once you reached.
Yeah, it's a junior officer application, so you have to be a junior officer. So the rank of either flying officer or flight lieutenant. Now it's pretty impossible nowadays to be a flying officer and Arrows pilot. I can't even see how you would be able to do it with the way that the rank structure works. But I'd been a flying officer. I finished my entire instructional tour, and I'd gone to Canada as a flying officer. So, you know, back in the day, it was possible to get over 1,000 hours as a pilot officer, flying officer. So it might have been feasible just to have been a flying officer at Arrows pilot, but certainly now impossible. So really, the rank of flight lieutenant. And as soon as you get that squadron leader post, then you're no longer eligible to apply.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's just blown my mind now. That has.
But you will see in the team there are a lot of squadron leaders, because the way that the promotion process works is that once you are in the team, you're still eligible to be read for promotion. So if you, on the back of your last report, you could get promoted even though you've now been selected for the team, which is why I think there are 3 squadron leaders in the current Red Arrows team. Apart from Red 1, I think there are 3 other squadron leaders. And in fact, there's 4. And that's because they've been promoted while they have already been selected for the team.
That's cool. That's very, very cool. That's obviously what happened to yourself then, I take it.
It did. Well, I actually got promoted as I was leaving the team. So I did 3 years in the team as a flight lieutenant. I left on promotion. So I went to a desk job on promotion. So for my first 3 years in the team, I was actually a flight lieutenant.
Okay, brilliant. And going back to your application process, how long was it from start to finish? I mean, when you applied, how long was it before you were told yes?
Let me think about this. I think the way it worked when I was doing it was they would send a signal being, a very antiquated method of communication in the military, where through the communication center, you'd send out this signal, and the Red Arrows would send it out to every station and say, anybody who wants to apply, here are the criteria, send your application back via signal. Now, no one ever sends signals. So I think that was the first test, was to see if you could actually send a signal or not. So apply via signal with your hours, when you were, your seniority and rank was, and all those sort of things. So applied, I think that was in around the February time. So February 2007. That process then kicked off. The shortlist was in April, so a couple of months later. Shortlist being the sort of down selected group of applicants. So there are normally around 30 a year that apply to join the team.
Wow.
From those 30, the sifting process, if you like, is done by the pilots on the team. So Red One will read every applicant's flying record from day one of flying training to present day frontline report, and look at their strengths and weaknesses and work out, in his mind, where his strengths and weaknesses lie. He will then précis all of those to the team pilots. Now, every single applicant, all 30 of them, we have a big meeting and sit down for hours, and it is quite literally hours, talk about all these candidates. It's tried where hardest to be done anonymously, so that you aren't, favoritizing a friend or somebody it's done based on what his report says, what he's done, what his attributes are. And then I say his or hers. And of course, you can't take 30 to take them to the next stage of selection. So the down selection process is to choose 9, and that becomes what is known as the shortlist. Those 9 shortlist pilots then go away for a week-long selection process normally in the Mediterranean training camp, which used to be in Cyprus. Most recently has been in Greece.
Because I was going to say, I think you did Danger Men. I think it was the Danger Men series based on the Red Arrows for your first one, and I think you guys were in Akrotiri for it.
Danger Men was, yes, that was my first training camp. So that's when I was in the team. I'd been selected. I'd already joined the team, and it was the work up to my first year as Red 3. That was when Danger Men was filmed.
Did you have any idea that your whole process was going to be filmed and aired to the world when you were applying?
Well, that bit wasn't. So it was the year before Danger Men. So it would have been 2006. That's when the BBC filmed the entire selection process. So luckily I got away with that. I didn't get that bit filmed. I just got the training once I was already selected. Because I think for the selection, I think having a camera crew there would have been that sort of extra bit of added pressure that would have been a real pain in the backside, if I'm honest. But no, I didn't have it for the selection. I just had it for the training.
Okay, that's yeah. I was gonna say, because it would really add, because you're going in for interviews and there's a guy standing in the corner with a BBC camera filming it, absolutely everything. It would really put the pressure on, especially when you're trying to get a coveted slot in the Red Arrows.
Absolutely, yeah.
So how long was it then when you took the post? And so you've gone out to Akrotiri. I think was your selection or your shortlist in Akrotiri?
Yes, it was. It was in April 2007. April 2007, and then when you got back, they didn't let on at the end of that week-long selection. There was no letting on as to how well you'd done. It was right, off you go, back to your frontline unit, and we'll get in touch with how successful or not you've been. And off we went. Just not knowing how it performed. You get no feedback whatsoever. So worth mentioning what the selection process involves. Now, the week in Akrotiri or in Greece, as has been recently, is quite structured, and the idea is that you see the whole spectrum of somebody's personality, because you put them in situations where they might not feel comfortable socially. You put them in positions of flying in the back of an airplane 3 times a day, where they're going to be tired. They're going to be under the spotlight. They're going to be tired. You're going to put them through quite a stressful flying test, where you test their hands and feet as in flying in close formation, doing aerobatics, which is something they've never done before. You put them in front of an interview board of 3 senior officers who just fire nasty questions at them. You actually do some media training where you stand in front of a camera, and the media officer will throw very nasty sort of journalistic type questions at you, and try and come up with the most reasoned answer without trying to put your foot in things. they're the sort of things that you would get involved with. And then, of course, there's very much a social aspect to it as well, because you've got to get to know these people socially, because the team, it's such a small, close-knit team. It has to work well on a social level as well as a hands and feet purely flying level. And that is done through various events that happen throughout that shortlist week, just to get to know the guys and girls, just from, as I said before, the whole spectrum of their personality. And that is very important. You know, if you're going to be in the team with one of these people, and the chances are some days in the summer you're spending 16 hours a day together, so you just got to get on for the team to be able to function properly. So choosing the right people is important from a practical aspect in flying the aeroplane, but also from that personal aspect of gelling as a team.
And did the whole team get a say in, like you were saying, that everyone sits down, goes through the applications, but does the whole team get a say then after the shortlist of who's going to join, who's the next newbie's going to be?
Yeah, that is the beauty of the Red Arrows, and why it's worked so well over the last 55 years is it's a self-selecting team. In the military, you don't normally have the luxury of choosing your own people. You know, people get posted in, posted out. The Special Forces is similar in that they can choose the people they want based on performance on the selection, and that's the same in the Red Arrows. Is the pilots in the team have the vote as to who will join the team. It does have to be sanctioned by some senior officers, but generally they would look at each candidate's merits based on what the team have chosen. And I think it's, you know, certainly in my 10 years, although how I got in, I don't know, but in my 10 years, I think it's worked very well. And as I say, it's a proven system that has worked for 55 plus years. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Did it change at all over the 10 years you were with the Reds?
That selection process, what we call the shortlist process. No, it didn't. No, there were a couple of things that changed, just based on not being in Cyprus. You know, Cyprus was good because it was a military camp. There were it lent itself very well to some of those aspects of arranging events. Whereas if you're doing it in a Greek airbase and, you know, it's staying in civilian accommodation, it doesn't work quite as well. So there were a couple of things that changed, but I mean, they were minor. The actual process was identical every year.
And then
I don't know how they do it this year. I guess they have to do it on Zoom or something.
I was gonna say, yeah, they're probably sat like this at the moment now doing it.
Yeah, I guess so. A flying test on simulators on DCS or something.
Yeah, work from home, virtual Red Arrows flying. I'll say, with the amount of air shows getting cancelled, they might actually end up like that.
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
So when you get through the shortlist, how did you find out that you were getting onto the Red Arrows?
Yeah, that is a good question. I was quite bizarrely at the time. So again, 2007, there were quite a few frontline squadrons still. The F3 was still going, the GR4, the Harrier. I think the Jaguar had just disbanded. But there's still a lot of frontline squadrons. But it just so happened that on my shortlist of 9 people, 3 of us were from the same squadron. So and it just so happened that it was the same boss who I mentioned earlier, who was an ex-Red Arrow. So I think he had sort of suggested, you know, come on, go put the application in. There's no harm in trying, kind of thing. Anyway, so 3 of us from the same squadron. We got back to the squadron, straight back to work, and the boss was away overseas. But what he did is that when the results came through, it was the squadron boss who had got it from the station commander. We each had to sit individually in an office, completely isolated, wait for the phone to ring, pick it up, speak to the boss. We weren't allowed to leave the office till all 3 of us had the result. Unfortunately, the other 2 didn't get in, but I did. So coming out of the room and having been told, you know, and it's that really awkward moment of, you know, I'm absolutely elated here. I've just got my dream job, but I don't want to have this massive grin on my face because I know these other 2 haven't. And, you know, that was quite hard to manage, to be honest. But that happened. I think we got back from the shortlist on the Tuesday, and it was the Friday afternoon we got the results. So it was quite quick. Quite quick. And then what was then interesting is that we were actually going on an exercise at 4 o'clock the following morning. So as I said, it was a Friday night. Happy hours in the bar were normally good on a Friday night anyway, but this one was particularly good with the amount of champagne I was buying and drinking. And then we had to get up at 4 o'clock to get on a bus from Lucas to Bryce Norton, which was, you know, so Scotland down to Oxfordshire. It was a long way in a bus to then jump on I think it was a TriStar or a VC10 to then fly out on this exercise. So that was quite hard work, but you know what? I wouldn't have given it up for the world. That was the best hangover ever, I think.
Oh, 100%. You'd suffer it just for that news, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then how long was it from, because you went on exercise then, how long was it from picking up that phone, getting told you're successful, to actually joining the Red Arrows?
Yeah. So what happened there was went out. It was a month-long exercise in Denmark we were going on. So when did the exercise, it was actually a course, the Tactical Leadership Program course, which was great because it gave you a sort of NATO qualification in tactical leadership, which was very good. So very enjoyable, flying with a load of European countries and Americans. Did the course, got home. I did another probably 6 weeks on the squadron, and then I had to go back to Valley to learn how to fly the Hawk again. And then it was over to Scampton to join the team.
I didn't realize you get sent back to Valley to learn how to fly. I thought you just had to learn how to fly it again while on the job.
No, well, that Valley doesn't have the Hawk T1 anymore. They just have the Hawk T2. So back in the day, it was you'd go to Valley and relearn it. But now the ground school is done at Valley and the simulators at Valley. But I think the flying's done at Leeming on the T1, or there is the facility to do it in house with the instructors from the Central Flying School. If I don't think that's being done at the moment, certainly. In fact, the team hasn't changed for a while, so I don't know how it's working.
That's yeah, it's pretty intense then, just to get to the Red Arrows before you can even start training.
Yeah, well, actually, it was quite a short course. I think it was 10 hours on the Hawk just to get back in the cockpit, get your instrument rating, just learn the systems again through ground school, bit of simulator stuff, and then just get your first pilot qualification renewed in 10 hours, and then back off you go to Lincolnshire and join the team. What was good about that though is that you got to shadow the team for the back end of the season. So you'd go away in the back seat of the guys, you'd sit in the back of public displays, because the only people that are allowed to sit in the back of a public display are future pilots or supervisors.
Okay. I was seeing, was it, I think on the last documentary, I think it might have been a practice display actually, Commander Chris Hadfield joined the guys, and I know you guys took Lewis Hamilton and David Coulthard for a spin, but I think they were all practice stuff.
Yeah, exactly. If it's a practice, you can take passengers. And in fact, most of the practices when I was in the team at Scampton, every day there were passengers coming flying. And the idea of that is that they are prospective candidates. So these are pilots that are looking at joining the team, and they're coming to have an insight on what it's like. So they were eligible, or they were allowed to come and fly. So a lot of them did, and it was great to have them.
It's great. When you get the opportunity to fly in a Red Hawk, you have to say yes to it, don't you?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's like,
yeah, I did it. My first go in the back of a Red Jet was in, I think it was 2003. I was just coming to the end of it was towards the end of my time as an instructor at Linton on Ouse. So I just phoned the team up and said, look, at some point in the future, I'd like to join. Can I come and have a go? And they said, yeah, come down. So I spent the day flying in the back of the Red Jets. It was just jaw dropping and eye, because it's so different to what you're doing as an instructor at a Tucano compared to them flying so close and so low, and it just absolutely eye opening. And I caught the bug even more after that.
Because I was going to say, it must seem like really, really close, because when you fly loose formation with your mates, it looks close. When your Red Arrow's close, it must look like you can just reach out and touch them.
To be honest, the references on the Hawk that you flew at Valley weren't too far from the references the Red Arrows fly. Now, of course, the idea of that is you need to be close, because if you're going through cloud as a 3-ship, thick, dense cloud is actually quite difficult to see your leader. So you need to be tight in on the references to be able to keep him in sight, because you're not looking at your instruments, you're trusting him on his instruments. So you need to be quite close. So the idea of close formation was taught anyway. You just took it up a gear with the Red Arrows and did it, aerobatics and with 9 airplanes.
Wow, it's still amazing when you talk about it like that. It's just like there is 9 jets, really close formation, just casually doing aerobatics, and that's a day job.
It doesn't start like that, has to be said. You start off with small formations, and then the more proficient you become, and the less movement and errors there are in your position, then you add more and more airplanes to it. So it's not just day one off you go as a 9-ship and go upside down. It starts with sort of 2s and 3s and 4s, and then just gets bigger and bigger.
Your first training day, even though you're not in the red suit yet, but you're in a Red Hawk, does it feel a little bit special knowing that you've, regardless of anything that happens in the world, you've flown a Red Arrows Hawk?
Yeah, well, it's a good question, because the very first training day, you'd expect when you were doing converting to a new type or something, you'd have an instructor with you. But day one on the Reds is no, you can fly the Hawk because you've just been to Valley and got your Hawk qual. So off you go. We're going to go and do some 3 or 4 ship looping and rolling. So that is day one. And interestingly, the way it worked is that it was the end of the season when we started our training. So the season had finished, but the team was going on a tour of Middle East, Far East. So we only had a little bit of time in between finishing the season to then going on tour to squeeze in some training. Red 1 needed some leave, so he went on leave for 2 weeks, which meant the executive officer, who at the time was Red 8, he led me and my 2 newbie buddies in close formation aerobatic. So he was our teacher for 2 weeks before Red 1 then came back. We did a little bit on his wing, and then we stopped training and went with the team all the way to Malaysia and back.
Wow. That
which was it was because we had no responsibility. You know, I was quite literally a bag carrier. My job was bags. So when we got to hotels, I had to make sure everyone's bag went to the right room and that they had all their kit. So I was a bag carrier for the Red Arrows. And you know what? It sounds really derogatory, but you know what? I don't care. It's the best job in the world coming up. You know, I'm in Malaysia. If I have to put 10 bags in 10 bedrooms, you know, so be it. I'm quite happy to do that.
If I got a phone call to say after Red Arrows tomorrow morning, you come and carry our bags, I couldn't wait to put that in the CV. I'd be there in the light.
Absolutely.
So then when you do, so you do your training, obviously you add more and more jets in. It then comes to Public Display Authority Day or PDA Day. What is that like? Because even though you've done all these formations, you've basically done everything. You're not going to do anything new on PDA Day. Is there still the element of nerves and excitement that's there?
Definite nerves, and the only, like you say, you're training 3 times a day, 5 days a week. You're doing a lot of training of that display, and it's a set routine. So there's, apart from the weather, there are very few variables in what you're doing. So the biggest fear is letting the team down. You know, when the spotlight is on the team for PDA, your biggest fear is actually that is the most important crowd you're going to display to that year. Because if you don't perform to your best on that day, and the team don't get granted public display authority, then you've let the team down. So that was the fear. That's where the butterflies came from, was that you are performing to the most important crowd of the entire year. It might only be one person, but it is the most important crowd. So that's where the apprehension, I would say, came from in terms of PDA. But what a proud moment, though, getting told that you've passed it by a senior officer, and then it is quite literally, right, well done, you've passed, go and get your red suit on. And that happened straight away, glass of champagne into red suits. And then the weirdest thing about it is that up till now, when you've been flying aeroplanes in the Air Force, you've only ever worn a green flying suit. And now you strap into a flying suit in a flying jet in a red flying suit, it just feels completely alien. You know, you look down and it's just red, and it really catches you. For the first, I think it was sort of the first 3 or 4 trips, I found it quite difficult to adjust to looking down and seeing my legs that are now red instead of green, and it was just very bizarre. It quite a minor point, but it was just something that stood out in my memory as what was different about being a PDA Red Arrows pilot to being a trainee Red Arrows pilot.
It must feel good as well, like you've got your red suit on to climb into the red jet, knowing that you are officially a Red Arrows at that stage.
Yeah, and of course they've put your name on the jet by that point as well. So you know you're in your, like you say, your red suit that's got your embroidered name on, Red Arrows crest on your arm, Union Jack over your right breast here, and then you're climbing into a jet with your name on. I mean, that is definitely a pride making moment from me having wanted to do it for 20 something years. You know, that is the definite tick in the box to achieve.
From watching Danger Men as well, you had quite an amazing first year, because I think you guys did one show which all your family decided they wanted to come and watch as well, and then as soon as you were done, that ended up going straight across the Atlantic to the States.
We did, yeah, we did the Southend Air Show, where, as was depicted in the documentary, all my family were there. We'd actually done a couple of other shows as well, but for TV they didn't include that bit. So we did a few shows, and then up sticks, flew across the Atlantic to display Canada, and then down the eastern coast of the US, which was brilliant. What an experience! You know, taking a 30-something-year-old single-engine jet across the Atlantic up through Iceland, Greenland, northern Canada, and then down, the scenery is stunning. But then to go and display in front of massive crowds in the United States. Yeah, it was incredible. At that point, I'd never actually been to the States.
Oh wow.
So I'd lived in Canada for 8 months. I'd seen Canada and I'd lived Canada, but I'd never actually set foot in the United States. So the first time I ever got to the States was in a Red Hawk, which was great actually. It was a good stat. And we got all the way down to New York, and we displayed in New York Harbor, which hasn't been done since, and had never been done before. So it wasn't in downtown Manhattan, albeit we did fly there after the show. But it was a place called South Beach, so it was only a few miles away from Manhattan, so you could see in the background, you could see the skyline of Manhattan as you're displaying, and it was, what an incredible memory. And then after the show, flying past the Statue of Liberty at very low level, and then down past the Empire State Building at very low level. That was, definitely one to remember.
What a first year to be on the team, because then you guys also, I know it's not really a competition, but you guys were pitched against the Thunderbirds, Blue Angels, and the Snowbirds. You had that added pressure of we need to
well that was again, that was all for television. It didn't really work that way, but there was a sunset show that is depicted in the documentary that they asked if we would do it because we traveled the furthest. So would we be the sunset act for the sort of dignitaries? So we didn't win a competition just because we traveled the furthest, and they weren't probably going to have the Red Arrows back there for certainly a long time. Would we take the honor of doing the sunset show for the dignitaries, which we did? And I remember that so well. If people ask me which is my favorite display, that one is in my top 3, just because going back to when I trained in Canada, a place called Cold Lake, one of the guys that was on the course with me was a Canadian guy called Marco Rasconi. He then went to be a Hornet pilot in the Canadian Air Force, but then he joined the Snowbirds. And when we went to the Quebec Air Show in 2008, he was Snowbird 4 and I was Red 3. So I got to fly in his tutor during one of their displays.
Wow. And
that sunset display that is depicted in Danger Men, he was in my back seat. So not only are the environmentals, the conditions were perfect. There was not a breath of wind. The smoke was lingering. The sun was huge as it was setting. And I've got my mate in the back who I trained with 4 years earlier in Canada, who I'd flown with the day before in his display. It was just, everything came together. It was just one of those perfect days and perfect displays that I will remember forever, and definitely in my top 3 of memorable displays.
It's one of them where you can't wipe the smile off when you land, isn't it?
Oh god, yeah, absolutely. Even think about it now, and quite often I've got the video from 2008. We had an end of season video made every year, and that features in there, and it still brings back such great vivid memories.
How did you find flying with the Snowbirds? Like, was it massively different to what you were used to with the Red Arrows, or?
Their display is pretty similar, actually. They are 9 aircraft, probably a little bit slower than the Hawk, but it was at the time the tutor was there, or just before the Hawk came in over there. It was their primary jet trainer. So in terms of the role it performed, a bit like a jet provost, I suppose. So side by side seating. The thing I found the strangest about that aeroplane was just the strapping into the ejection seat. It just seemed so convoluted, and there were so many clips and straps and zips, and it just seemed to take forever. And I remember getting the safety brief thinking, I hope I don't have to get out of this in a hurry, because there are clips everywhere. But then when you get in the airplane, I was just in awe of what those guys were doing, because the airplane flies very differently to the Hawk, so they do things very differently. For example, you see a lot of photos of the Snowbirds in line abreast, where they're directly, wingtip to wingtip in a straight line, all 9 airplanes. And they do that so well. You can't do that in a Hawk because it's got a swept wing. The wing's behind you. So it's very difficult to fly line abreast in a Hawk. The references to line up for line abreast formation are very difficult. Whereas in a Snowbird, you've got perfect reference, which is the leading edge of your wing, which you're looking out because you're sat right on top of it. So they do line abreast formation very well. And sitting in the middle of that as Snowbird 4 was, wow, this is just fantastic. So it was just great to experience another team doing it so well.
Brilliant. I was going to say, because it must be interesting to see that, because being in the Red Arrows, you've got your own style of doing things. You got everything that how to do. So it must be great to look at other teams and say, that's how they do that. Or even just the experience, like you said, experiencing wing to wing, like looking right and seeing a load of Snowbirds, looking left, seeing a load of Snowbirds. And
yeah, exactly.
You can never get to experience.
Yeah, and I've taken that away, and in the last few years, I've been very fortunate to have worked with certainly a lot of the European teams and Thunderbirds Blue Angels when they visited the UK, and I've been over to the States for conferences as well. And it's quite good to get everyone's heads together to talk about best practice and to talk about, right, what have you learned from this maneuver you tried, and is there anything you would suggest we didn't do because of this happened? Or, so it's very good to have a community that is willing to engage and willing to share those stories and offer some form of expertise in how maybe not to do it or how best to do it or however it might be. So I've been very fortunate in that regard to have worked with a lot of the teams. I'm also on a board member of the European Airshow Council, and in fact this time next week, it's Thursday today, this time next week I'm chairing a gathering online of all of the European display teams. Wow. Where we'll do exactly that. We'll sit and talk about how have the teams trained during COVID, what are the biggest risks when we get back to flying performances, and what, there might be a team that's got one measure in place that another team hadn't thought of and that they can take on board. So again, it's all about best practice and sharing wealth of experience.
Brilliant. That's really, really cool. To say that you can do that and you're part of that and everything, that's amazing.
I do feel very fortunate, and I've held display pilots in awe for most of my life, and now to be part of a community in which they're so openly engaged and talking and sharing stories is really the way forward. Yeah, it's where we should be. We get
a Michaelite magazine every month through the door, and there's a bit in it, like you say, a bit called it's in the middle called safety. And it's just people talking about their experiences. So people like myself who haven't, touch wood, had an accident around like that can learn from other people's mistakes. So it's great to see it from that perspective.
Yeah, and there's a key thing in every RAF safety magazine or flyer magazine or pilot magazine or the magazines you're talking about. It's a section normally called "I learned about flying from that," and they are the stories you need to just read because it might stop you having the same thing. Yeah, and that's very important.
I always say every time I take off, every day's a school day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it still is. Yeah, absolutely.
So, Mike, actually, staying on to accidents, you had quite a horrific one, really, where you had to eject out of a Hawk. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, that was March 2010. So by now it's my third year in the team. I've been very fortunate to have been picked to be in the synchro pair. So in 2009, I was synchro number 2 as Red 7. And then in 2010, I was the synchro leader. That's the sort of natural progression. A year as wingman and then third year as leader. So I became synchro pair leader. We'd done most of our work up. We were up to 9 ship standard as the team, and we were deploying over to Cyprus. But on the way, we were going to spend 10 days or so in Crete, Hellenic Air Force Base. And it was our second day there, I think. We hadn't been there long, and it was a training trip, and it didn't go well. One of the maneuvers went wrong, and we collided head on, myself and the then Red 7. Had a head-on collision, and we were low. It was only 100 feet when we executed the maneuver. My last input was to push, so I knew I was going down, doing 400 miles an hour each. So, it was a big bang with 800 mile an hour of closure. And I wasn't going to stay around, disorientated because my canopy had shattered. And I thought, I'm not staying here. So I pulled the handle and took the Martin Baker way out.
That's mad. And can you remember much of it?
I remember absolutely everything up to pulling the handle. And then I got knocked, the force of the ejection, I got knocked out. And I spent about 6 seconds in the parachute before I hit the ground because we were so low. It was only about 6 seconds in the chute. I came to as I hit the ground pretty much with smoke and fire everywhere. And because we were display practicing, there was a supervisor right 230 meters away from where we crashed, because that was the idea, is that we were crossing at the datum point right in front of the supervisor. So it just so happened there was an emergency response team right there. So within probably a minute, if that, there were people over me looking after me. So I remember everything. I was pulling the handle, and then from hitting the ground coming to is the next memory. So there's probably a blank of about 6 or 7 seconds where I'm unconscious.
Wow. I was going to say not much really happened there, but it sounds of it, you were that low anyway. It sounds like you just banged out. The next thing you know, you're on the ground anyway.
But the video of the accident it shows exactly that. It's the collision. it pans onto the other jet and then pans back briefly, and then the jet's on the ground. So it was pretty quick succession of events.
And what was recovering from that like? Were you injured at all?
I did. I was more injured than I thought I was, actually. I had dislocated my shoulder. I had quite a lot of lacerations on my arms and my face, and more importantly, I damaged both my knees. I hit the ground hard, unconscious, and my legs bent backwards. So I ripped all the ligaments and tendons in my knees, which I didn't know about at the start. So I thought, dislocated shoulder, I'll be back flying again in a week or two. As it happened, quite a few weeks in hospital, bouts of surgery, 3 months in a wheelchair, and nearly 10 weeks of rehab. And unfortunately, I didn't get my med cap back for a year. So it was a year off proper flying. I convinced the doctors to let me fly in the back seat of the Reds jets, 6 months after the accident, but that was just as a passenger, just to go and experience it before I left the team. But it took a year to get back to full fitness.
Wow. Especially, was there any disappointment there because that was your last year as the team, you knew you were leaving? Was there disappointment that you didn't get to do the display season?
There, to be honest with you, the things that put everything into perspective, yes, I was a bit grumpy, for the first couple of days because, I was more ashamed that it happened on my watch. This synchro pair don't hit each other. I was the synchro leader. This is not shouldn't have happened on my watch. So I was disappointed in myself as to why it happened. But I got airlifted out of Greece into the UK, and I went to Selyak Hospital, which at the time, so this is 2010, Iraq and Afghanistan campaigns are ongoing. There are guys and girls coming back from theatre who have life-changing injuries. They have got limbs missing. They've had real severe trauma. And I was put on the same ward as these guys and girls, and to have somebody in your bed who's lost 2 limbs and their life will never be the same again. I had all my limbs. They weren't functioning properly, but they were going to be after some surgery and rehab. They were going to be fine. And you just got to put everything into perspective. There was no point in sulking about not being a Red Arrows pilot anymore because I was alive and I had all my limbs. I couldn't have been any more grateful to the fact that I was in that situation, and having that perspective probably changed my entire outlook on the whole situation. Because had I just gone to a normal hospital ward, I probably would have been sulking and felt very sorry for myself. But when you're surrounded by those people that their lives have completely changed forever, there's no even space to consider how badly done by you are when you're going to be absolutely fine in a year's time.
Wow. Yeah. You never really think of those things, really. It's kind of, I know myself, you get into accident, you go into your own kind of head, but like that, when you're exposed to stuff like yourself, it really, really puts into perspective everything.
Indeed. Yeah. And then following on, going to Headley Court, which was the Defence Rehab Centre, and being, again, surrounded by people who are the most inspiring guys and girls, that they've got both of their legs have been amputated, but they could do more physical stuff on a exercise ball than I could. They were so determined to try and live as best a life they could, given that the situation they'd been put in. There was absolutely no place for feeling sorry for yourself. It definitely was not an option.
Yeah. And then when you got back to the team, when you said you managed to convince the doctors that you go back season, was there any apprehension at all getting back into flying?
No, absolutely not. Completely the opposite. I was just desperate, absolutely desperate to get in the jet. In fact, so I joined with the chap I joined with in 2007. At the time he was Red 9. So the first trip I did with him, I flew in the back of Red 9's jet. And then the next trip I was in with Red 7, who's the guy who I'd collided with. I was straight in his back seat because, I just wanted to go and do the synchro stuff again. That's where the real fun was. And I was just desperate to go and do it.
Brilliant. And then, so after that, you've left the team. That's your 3 years done now. Was it hard to adjust to your desk job afterwards?
That is definitely, I talk about the situation I was in terms of didn't feel sorry for myself. But what had happened then was I was leaving the team on promotion, as I mentioned, to go to a desk job in a predominantly civilian environment. I was in a procurement team, predominantly civilian, which wasn't anywhere near close knit. It was the opposite end of close knit because we just, we worked together 9 to 5 and then didn't really socialize out of work. So I found that very difficult. Gone from one extreme to the other. That you're in the for I think one of the closest knit teams there is to no close knit team or team ethos whatsoever. I found that very difficult to adjust. And I was living on my own in Bristol at the time, so I didn't have any close friends in Bristol. You know, all my friends and family were in Lincolnshire. So, you know, it was just a really odd existence. But it didn't last long. You know, I didn't start that till January 2011, and I was out of there again by December 2011. So,
and was that to join the team again as Red 10?
Exactly, to go back to the Red Arrows. Yeah, but what I did to keep myself sane is that I started flying for the Air Experience flight.
Oh wow!
That's so cool. Once a week or once a fortnight, whatever I could achieve getting out of the office was to go to St Athan in South Wales and fly the Grob Tutor to fly air cadets around, and that was genuinely some of the most rewarding flying ever. You know, I've done some pretty cool things in airplanes, but flying a cadet for the first time or doing aerobatics with a cadet for the first time, knowing how special it was to me when I did it back in the 90s, it just seeing the look on their face when you took off or when you went upside down or did a loop, I just knew how special that was for me however many years previous. So that was really rewarding. And yeah, the Grob Tutor is not an airplane to shout about, but it is when it's your first go at doing something like that. You know, that is a real experience, and I knew how much it meant to them. So the most enjoyable thing about my desk job in Bristol was going to St Athan and giving these kids flying experiences, because I just knew how important it was for me back in the day.
I love talking to someone like yourself as well, who loves sharing their passion, and you're still so passionate about it. You've done all this stuff behind you. You've done how many years in aviation, and yet you're still passionate as you were probably at day one.
Well, I think there's the old adage about fighter pilots. They love talking about two things: flying and themselves. We put the two together, then you can't go wrong.
I remember I did myself and yourself, we did a air mobility flight going up to see the Northern Lights in 2017. And I remember when you were up on stage having a chat and introducing Tim Peake was with us. And when you were introducing Tim Peake, I remember one thing that stood out was you were saying that when there's a Red Arrows pilot in the room, they like to let you know there's a Red Arrows pilot in the room, unless there's an astronaut.
Yeah, exactly. If there are no Formula One drivers or astronauts, then yeah, you like to think yourself the coolest as a Red Arrows pilot. But yeah, when Tim Peake was there, it didn't work. And yeah, I've been in the company of Formula One drivers, and you can't use that either.
Well, going back, you talking about Formula One drivers, didn't you get to race your Hawk against Lewis Hamilton in his Formula One car?
I did, yeah, very lucky. That was, in fact, that still is my number one best Red Arrows memory was racing Lewis. Yeah, I'm a huge Formula One fan anyway, and I got the opportunity to have a little race with him on the runway at Scampton. I had David Coulthard in my back seat, and we went and raced up the runway at Scampton. Yeah, what a fantastic day that was.
I have to say, it sounds really cool. I've seen the videos, the official stuff that gets put out and everything. It just looked awesome. And then to see Lewis Hamilton lining his F1 car up with you sitting on the left-hand side already just to go, it was amazing.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about that was a pre-hybrid. If you know much about Formula One, that was the old school Formula One. So before the hybrid engines, so the really noisy ones. And one of the passes we did over the runway, he was at full throttle, going down the runway at whatever he was doing, 190 miles an hour. We were doing 550 knots, which was the max speed of the Hawk. So full throttle. The cockpit was fairly noisy. The air conditioning system and the pressurization system was actually quite noisy. And of course, you're wearing a helmet with ear protection. And we flew over the top of him at 100 feet. And I could still hear his car and him changing gear. I mean, that's how noisy those cars were.
Wow.
We're doing 600 plus miles an hour with engine noise, with cockpit noise, and ear cups in our helmets, but could still hear his car. And that's still a very vivid memory about how loud that car was.
I can only imagine, like, did you get to see it racing up and down the runway, standing on the ground? Like, what was the noise of it like when you were
not there? But I've done quite a lot of work with Formula One since, and yeah, so I've had the opportunity to be in and around Formula One cars, and yeah, it is a ear-splitting noise with the old school engines. The newer ones are much better now than they were at the start, but yeah, ear-splitting noise and fantastic. Everyone loves a bit of the smell of petrol and the sound of engines, right?
Oh, definitely, definitely. It's my dad. He races motorbikes, classics, and just when he starts his bike up, it's just a straight exhaust pipe. When he starts that up, the smell and the noise is just fantastic, and you kind of
Yeah.
miss that. You know, when an old car drives by and you get that smell of everything, you miss that 'cause you don't get it with anything else.
No, exactly. And I just love the smell of two-stroke engines as well.
Yes.
Old school two-stroke bike or outboard motorboat engines. You know, they are. I love that smell. Not as good as the smell of avgas though.
No, you can't beat that. I do love Jet A1 though when it's when
Yes,
a
true.
turbine starts up and you think, oh yeah, that's a lovely smell.
Yeah, I have to say, stood next to a hawk when that starts. That has a very good smell. But the best smell, I'm sure we'll come on to it, is when you start a Merlin and you've got the cockpit open
Yes.
and you get the smell of the starting Merlin come wafting into the cockpit. That is an incredible smell.
I've never experienced that, but maybe one day. But well, it's just,
I
yeah,
think everybody has to experience that once in their life.
it's on the bucket list. It's definitely on the bucket list.
Perfect.
So going back to Red 10, how did you come about to being Red 10? Because you've done your 3 years on the team.
Yeah, Red 10 was a little bit different, but so before my accident, Red 10 was just a flight lieutenant from around the Air Force who, in fact, it moved to a squadron leader job, but unrelated. But it was just another fast jet pilot who was then brought in as the almost flew the spare, was the commentator, and did a bit of flight safety stuff. And then after my accident, one of the findings was that there wasn't any continuation of experience in the supervisory chain. So nobody outside of Reds 1 to 9 had any Red Arrows experience. So the proposal was that Red 10 or the officer commanding would have had Red Arrows experience. So they brought in a guy who had been in the team previously. He came to be Red 10 in 2000, ready for 2012. So he joined in 2011. But then unfortunately, 2011 was a shocking year for the Red Arrows. You know, there were two tragic accidents in August with John Eggin and in November with Sean Cunningham. And those two guys were killed, you know, within 3 months of each other, totally separate accidents, totally unrelated. You could argue they weren't even related to what the Red Arrows were doing. They were just freak fast jet accidents. Unfortunately, that meant that there was a shuffle around in the team. So the guy who had gone to be Red 10 was then chosen to replace Sean after his accident. So he was then not able to be Red 10. They needed a person who could quickly fill the position. I think people knew how desperate I was to get back in the team as well, having left it in fairly short order. So I was asked if I'd get back and be Red 10. So it was going to be a 2-year job, go back, do 2 years as Red 10, and then move on. And that's how it started. So end of 2011, I went back to Valley, learned to fly the Hawk again, and then I was back over at Scampton.
Well, you mentioned it's meant to be 2 years. If I'm not mistaken, you've done 6 years.
Yeah, it started off as 2, and then it was, well, can you do a third? Okay, I'll do a third. And then they said, well, look, we can't find any candidates to replace you. Would you consider retouring to do a whole nother tour? To which I said, well, yeah, why not? You know, I'm getting to fly Red Jets. I'm in a team that I absolutely love, I adore. I was thoroughly enjoying the role. You know, actually, a display pilot in the Red Arrows is an awesome job. I think Red 10 is better just because of the breadth of activity. You just involved with so many different things. You get so many different aspects of the team. You know, meeting people, inspiring people on the ground, going to an air show where you're the only person in a red suit. The other 9 are at the airport and you're the only person representing the team on the ground. You know, I thought it was a very important role. When I first started doing it, I was a little bit jealous of the guys out there doing the flying. I just wanted to get back in the cockpit and do the flying again. But that was very short-lived, you know, because then I started getting into the role of Red 10 and fell in love with it, absolutely. And you get a real buzz from the feedback you get from the crowd, you know, the clapping and cheering that the crowd give when the Red Arrows arrive, and you're sort of geeing them up over the commentary. It was really enjoyable in the end. I got into it in the end and really enjoyed it.
And from your time as Red 10, have you got a favorite display or anything? Does anything stand out?
Ooh, yeah, as a commentary side of it, there are a few. The top one's got to be. It was the 75th anniversary of D-Day. So we were in Portsmouth, 75th. No, it must have been the 70th. Yeah, it was 70th anniversary of D-Day, in Portsmouth on South Sea Common. Beautiful day, a massive, massive crowd on South Sea Common, and the commentary area was right in the middle of the crowd. So, I was just surrounded by hundreds of thousands of people who were reacting to, red, white, and blue flags and the red arrows flying. You can't get much more British than that. And it was such an experience. And I got to meet some D-Day veterans that day, and just the whole day was just mind-bogglingly fantastic in terms of the opportunities I was getting on that day, and to live and breathe Britishness. What is the best of British? This is remembering 70 years ago what those guys went through, thanking them for it, honoring them, and loving the fact that you're British, and just everyone enjoying themselves. And it was brilliant. So that was definitely up there. The Isle of Wight Festival was a good one, where I was on stage at the Isle of Wight Festival. Again, hundreds of thousands of people looking at this stage. They hadn't been told the red arrows were coming. So the organisers kept it completely from them. Yeah, so they had no idea. So I got on stage, and then the organisers said, "Look, we don't want any commentary for this one. We've got a soundtrack that we've put together. So just stand on the stage and enjoy a red arrow display in front of however many tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people." But the cheers from that crowd, I know now what it feels like to be a pop star on stage at a massive music festival, even though I wasn't doing anything at all. It was great. It was brilliant. So there were definitely some highlights. Going as Red 10 in 2012, I actually was in the formation for Flypast because it was only a 7-ship display. So I was Red 9 when we did transits and Flypast. So I got to be involved with the London Olympics opening ceremony.
Wow.
Queen's Diamond Jubilee. Just some incredible opportunities that they are up there in the top 5 memories of red arrows as well. Opening ceremony for the London Olympics, 1.4 billion people watching this on television. This is a big deal. Flying over London, and no pressure. I had Chief of the Air Staff in my back seat as well, so absolutely no added pressure.
Any little mistake you just picked up on it was.
I tell you, the profanities that came out of my mouth on that trip, that was a lot of pressure. I have to admit, that was definitely one where I was feeling the pressure.
So one that really stands out for me is you guys had come to Dublin in 2016. So I moved over here in July 2016. So the week beforehand, you guys had come to Dublin to display at the Bray Air Display.
Yeah.
I remember yourself, you were down, you were doing the commentary, you opened the show, blue skies, we got a full show, it was amazing. And I remember the Freaky Tricolori were displaying at the same thing, but I think they were closing it. So you guys came anyway, did an absolutely fantastic display. It was my first time seeing the full display where there wasn't a cloud base or anything like that. And then went back to Casement Aerodrome in Baldonnel. And then the commentator at that point was like, "Oh, ladies and gentlemen, the next display you're gonna love. They're just doing a fly past. Oh, here come the Freaky Tricolori." And he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for." And I thought, as he went to say the Freaky Tricolori, it was the red arrows, and you guys, as you were transiting back over the Irish, had come and given us a second fly pass that nobody was expecting.
Yeah, I remember that very well. Yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed the Bray Air Show. That was a really, really good show. I came across to Dublin to do the survey with all the organisers a few months previously, and just got looked after royally, just really well looked after. And then the reception we got when we arrived at Casement, I think we got there late. It was a difficult day with the weather getting in, and then actually performing at the show was brilliant. I was due to be there, I think in 2019 we were meant to come across with the Blades, but the weather prevented it.
Yeah, because I think the morning of that as well, actually 2016 wasn't great, because I remember we actually drove to Casement to stand on a mud mound to see if we could get a view of the Reds. And
right.
as you do when you're young and love aviation and stuff. And I remember we were driving down in the rain to the point where me and my mates were chatting about, is this going to go ahead or not? But we were like, you know what, we'll go to Bray anyway, just in case. And I'm so glad we did now.
It was, what a great, I think we actually displayed there in 2018 as well.
Oh, wow.
I think when I came, I'd gone back and displayed there as well. I'm pretty sure we did. I think it was either 16 and 17 or 16 and 18.
So cool, because I think it was the first time. It's the first time I definitely seen you in the country. All the other times I had to go up to Port Rush to see
Yeah.
it. Which it was
We
so
did we
nice.
did a display in I want to say Galway.
Oh yeah.
Back in 2008 or 2009, we displayed in Galway. It was a tall ships race, I think.
Oh yeah,
Seem
yeah,
to recall
yeah.
being there for that. That was good. Yeah, I think it was challenging weather that day as well, actually.
Because it's very rare you don't get challenging weather in Ireland.
Yeah, too true.
So you've done all that. You've now secured yourself already as the longest serving Red Arrows pilot. Um, then you've left do another was it another desk job that you left to do?
It was a sort of desk job. So I'd made the decision that I was leaving the Royal Air Force anyway. It just got to the point where I had done all of the flying I was probably ever going to have the opportunity to do. There was going to be nothing flying wise that was going to be on a par with what I'd have the opportunity to have done. I couldn't be Red 10 forever, unfortunately. So I just made the decision. You know, I had an option to leave point. You know, there are various stages you can leave the military, and I had one coming up. So I'd made the decision to leave. I had a year left to do. I'd already been invited to join the Blades Aerobatic team. So while I was still serving in the Air Force, they asked me to be a part-time member as I was in a desk job. But I say it was a sort of desk job because I was still flying. I was in exam wing of the Central Flying School as the air safety manager, but I was also still flying the Hawk as an examiner and instructor. So I would go back to Scampton and do instrument rating exams on the Red Arrows pilots, or do their annual check rides and do air tests on the Hawk and various other bits and bobs. So I was still flying the Hawk, albeit I was in the Central Flying School, but I was also in my spare time, I was working up to be Blade 3 with the Blades Aerobatic team.
And then before you could come out, it was due to a tragic event, but you got called back to the team for the centenary year of the RAF.
It was, yeah, utterly tragic again for the Reds. And just after I'd left once again, I was in the Central Flying School, as I mentioned, as their safety manager. The team were in their workup for the 2018 season. And then another dreadful accident saw the death of Corporal John Bayliss, one of the engineers who was sitting in the back of one of the aircraft that crashed. The pilot survived it with an ejection, but unfortunately John didn't make it and was sadly killed. So the pilot was, however, injured, which meant he couldn't continue with his role as Red 3. So the fact that I was still flying the Hawk, I'd only just left the team, I still lived in the area, I'd been Red 3, albeit 10 years previously. They said, you probably would be the quickest person to get back in, because there's only 6 weeks left until the end of the training period. To slot back in, the quickest person probably would be me to go and train quickly to get up to standard, ready for that 6-week test, if you like. So that's what happened. Yeah, I think I got told that on the Wednesday, and following Monday I was at Scampton again, wearing a Red Arrows name badge once more. So tragic circumstances, and I felt for the team. It was really difficult. It's difficult enough when aircrew suffer tragic accidents, but when it's a guy who is in the back of the aeroplane, this is the pinnacle of someone's engineering career, is to be chosen to be a flying circus engineer. To then have that happen is just really hard for the team to bear. So difficult times, very difficult times.
And how did you find it? Because it's quite a big thing to be brought back for. It's a senior year, because you guys had events planned all over the country. How did you find slotting back in and having to get ready in that 6 weeks?
I think that was the important part. You just nailed it. The 2018 was the RAF's 100 year, and it was important that the Red Arrows had a Diamond 9 to celebrate the centenary. That was quite a crucial thing. So with the short training time and to fit in with all those events, the training was compressed to that 6 weeks I mentioned. So to meet the initial event, I can't remember what it was, but would it be possible with me coming in? And to be honest with you, it was it's a bit like riding a bike. Not a lot had changed in 10 years. There are a couple of new maneuvers or different nuances to how the maneuvers were flown, the references might have very slightly changed. They change year on year, just depending on how it looks. Yeah, you try to change the references based on what it looks like in the debrief. The biggest thing is starting to learn to work with my opposing number. So the guy on the right wing, red 2, because of course it's the symmetry is all set up by reds 2 and 3, and the timing, a lot of the formation changes is set up by reds 2 and 3. So that was I wouldn't say the biggest thing, but that was one of the most notable things, was just learning to how he did things, so that he didn't have to change the way he operated, that I would just mold around him, because he was new to it and had been doing it for the previous 5 months. So yeah, that was the most notable thing. But to be honest, I've gone back to a team where, I love the team, I love the job. We were pretty much straight out to Greece for training after that. So the good thing about Greece, the idea of the exercise, that you're putting the polish on the display, and yes, the weather is more favorable than Lincolnshire at that time of year, but actually it's the 6 weeks of focusing on nothing but red arrows. You've got no distractions. You are just flying 3-4 times a day and getting the display honed. And that is, 6 weeks of that, and actually having experienced it previously, it wasn't too onerous.
Okay, so it's still quite
a little bit of pressure, but it wasn't hard to go overcome. And of course, the team, I'd been red 10 with the team the previous year, so there was only one new guy in the team that I hadn't worked with before. So I'd like to think I got on well with all of them, but you'll have to ask them that.
So that was. Did you know then that after that centenary year, you were coming out of the RAF?
Yeah, so at this point, I've still had the decision made that I was leaving at the end. So October 2018 was my last day in the Air Force, or last day at work, and Red Arrows was my last day at work. By this point, I'd already been offered a full-time job with the Blades, so I stepped out of Red 3 and became Blade 3, quite literally with a couple of weeks in between. In fact, I was in the cockpit of an extra when John's accident occurred. I was at Sidewall training. I landed, and one of the ground staff at Sidewall came over to me, knowing I was the air safety manager and that I would want to know about what happened. He came straight over when I shut the engine down and said, "Right, you need to get on your phone, because I think you're going to be busy." And sadly, I was.
Wow. Like, it's takes away from your. It's something that just hangs there, isn't it? It's like, because you're training for a new team and been brought back, but there's still always that tragicness of what happened.
Indeed, yeah. And as I say, that was for the entire season. Yes, it was great to be able to celebrate the RAF 100, but yeah, the whole season, our thoughts were definitely with John and his team.
Yeah, it's I can definitely see how it can affect throughout the whole season, because it just happened. And then as well, for you yourself, been the air safety officer, been told then as well that you need to get on your phone because you're going to be busy. Yeah. Unfortunately, that was the least of the worries for people involved. It was very difficult times, but onwards and upwards. Exactly. So then you've left the RAF on the centenary year, and that's what a way to go out as well, as with the Red Arrows in the centenary year, the RAF, and now you've joined the Blades, who, for people listening who don't know what the Blades are the world's only aerobatic airline, and they're also a team just made up of ex-Red Arrows. Would I be correct, Mike?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, so we are by the world's only aerobatic airline. We operate to the same standards as EasyJet, Ryanair, British Airways. We operate under an airline operator certificate, so very very strict criteria for the issue of an AOC. And the Blades, as part of 2XL Aviation, we actually have an AOC, and we operate passenger flying in our extra 300. So we are in aerobatic airplanes. They are designed for nothing but aerobatics, and we put 4 of them together, and we go with passengers who buy tickets to fly with us, and go upside down, a couple of meters away from each other.
That's so cool. So did that take any getting used to it? Because all of a sudden you've gone from flying something that's very, very fast and not taking passengers, to flying something that's slower but taking passengers on displays with you. Did that take a lot of getting used to?
Well, for the passenger side, actually, as I mentioned before, we did actually fly quite a few passengers. So during training sorties and certainly shortlist week, you've got somebody in your back for every trip for a whole week. So there were passengers with you a lot of the time, not for public displays. And that's the same with the blades. We can't take passengers on public displays. But in terms of the flying the aeroplane, they're very different. Of course, the Hawk is a fast jet. It's heavy. It's powerful. It's responsive, and I think the only thing that is similar is the responsiveness. But because the extra is much smaller, it makes it a tighter display. Actually, they're broadly similar in terms of what you do. There are things you can do with an extra that you wouldn't dream of doing in a Hawk. Some of the sort of what we call gyroscopic aerobatics, you wouldn't even think about doing that in a Hawk because it would not end well for you. But then there are things that you could do in a Hawk, flying along the ground at 500 miles an hour at 100 feet. You couldn't do that clearly in an extra. So each airplane has its own attributes, but from being Red 3 to going to Blade 3, what is noticeable is that I can picture my hand inputs that I make, hand and feet inputs that I make to stay in position in a formation loop as Red 3, and they are pretty much identical to the movements I make as Blade 3. Okay. Just imperceptible movements of the control column and the throttle. The difference being in a propeller driven airplane, as you slow down, you need to put some rudder in. So you just got to use your feet a bit more as the speed effect of the propeller. You have to just think about that, which you don't have to in a jet because there's no propeller effect. So, but from throttle and control column, pretty similar inputs, to be honest.
And did it take long getting used to the extra compared to the Hawk? When you're saying about putting the rudder and stuff in, did it take many sorties before you had that nailed?
Not really. I've been flying light aircraft as a hobby, sort of in and around being in the Reds anyway. So my missus could never understand why I was paying to go flying in a Cessna or a PA-28 when my day job was flying airplanes. But yeah, I ran a flying club at Scampton. So wow. I just love being in the air, and if there's an opportunity to do it, then I'll do it. So single engine piston flying wasn't brand new to me when I came to the Blades. What was relatively new was flying with a tailwheel or operating an airplane with a tailwheel. I'd actually got the conversion on that a few years previously in a Cessna, but hadn't really used it at all. So that was the difference in coming to the extra, was that now you're flying a tail dragger, and there are some nuances to think about with that. But in terms of the display, it's broadly similar. And of course, we're in a team of ex-Red Arrows pilots, as you mentioned. So the procedures have been born from the Red Arrows procedures. The radio procedures are pretty much identical. So the standard operating procedure of the Blades, if you put them side by side to the Red Arrows, there are differences, of course, because it is a different display, it's a different airplane. But the underlying procedural stuff that happens on the Blades has come from the Reds. So that would made it a relatively small leap.
Just going back on the radio calls, actually, Mike. I heard somewhere, you hear Red 1 say it all the time, that the Red Arrows are the only pilots who are allowed to shout on the radio. Is that true?
No, I've heard a lot of pilots shouting. Interesting you say that, though, because when I was Red 7, the year I was Red 7, 2009, we were really shouting. It just became almost part of a theatrical performance when we were doing the displays, to the point where we landed at Kemble, which was the ancestral home of the Red Arrows. This is where they were based in the Nat back in the 60s and 70s. And we landed at Kemble after this display, and we met a load of the founding members of the Reds and the team members from the 60s and 70s. And I got a proper ear bending from one of the 60s guys for how disgraceful it was with the shouting on the radio. And so we kind of toned it down after that. And then when I became Red 10 and I could hear the guy shouting on the radio, it actually started to wind me up as well. So poacher turned gamekeeper and a massive hypocrite is how I would label myself for that one.
So I take it you don't shout on the radio with the Blades then? No,
there's a couple of shouts where we can indicate to the other guys and girl how much we're enjoying it by how we respond to certain radio calls. So, but when you're doing this stuff day in, day out in a normal year, there are slight variations on it to sort of make things different, rather than it feel the same every time. You put variations on things just to give it an extra edge. And so that would be one of them, is that if you respond in a certain way to a maneuver call, then that means you're really enjoying it. Or if it's not going so well, then you might not respond in a certain way.
Brilliant. I always wondered that question. I had to ask because I always hear the Red One saying, "Oh, we're the only ones."
Yeah, I think that was the Danger Men documentary as well. And Jace realized that his pilots were shouting, and the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds didn't do that.
Brilliant. And then, so you qualified in the extra 300. How long was it before? Because you're an instructor on it. How long was it before you got your instructor rating on it?
I started full time with the Blades in start of March 2019. So I've done a little bit of part time flying and training up till then. I had to get my commercial pilot's license, so I left the Air Force in October, and then in January I got my commercial license. I had to do all the exams because they recognise a little bit of your military experience. But when we went to the European side of things with the ARSA, they didn't recognise a lot of the military qualifications. So all 14 ground exams, a flying course, instrument rating, all had to be done. So I had a couple of months to do that before I then started the job. So I started in March 19, and I did my instructor rating at the end of March. So it was only a month in the team before I did the instructor rating. But that, again, this is where they did recognise some of the instructor qualifications, because 600 hours of instructing in the Air Force, actually they do see that as okay, that's a lot of experience from an instructor point of view. Now you can be an instructor in the civilian world.
Was the instructor course on the extra, was it kind of like the Tornado, where they were like, well, you've plenty of hours flying, you just do a checkout on it, and then they're
yeah, no, exactly that. So an examiner turned up at Sywell, turned up and told me, right, I want you to teach me. It was stalling. He wanted me to teach him. So teach me a stalling exercise. And then you teach a canned package of stalling in accordance with CAA principles. And then it was a case of, right, I'm going to do an aerobatic maneuver, as this is him talking. As a student, you then have to work out what he's doing wrong, fault find it, fault analysis, and then teach him how to do it properly. So I think we did 3 or 4 of those. The examiner was an aerobatic pilot anyway, so he was purposely doing things wrong. I had to work out what it was, teach him how to do it right, and it was very enjoyable, actually, because the guy hadn't had a huge amount of time in the extra. He'd flown it once or twice before, but he was quite keen on just flying the aeroplane. But then at the end of the flight, it goes back to when I was mentioning about the A2 in the Air Force. You then get the ground exam, where he starts picking all the tricky subjects out and asks you about meteorology and flight instruments and all those sort of things, and then you have to describe it in an instructional way rather than answer the question. So that's just something to get your head around. And so it's a 3-year qualification. So at the end of 3 years, I have to go and do it all again.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
How many years have you done it now then? Is it? Must be 2019, I think you started, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I'm coming up to 2 years. Yeah, and the week after next it'll be 2 years in the Blades.
Wow. And I take it you're still loving it and enjoying it.
Well, one of the years has been brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first year, 2019, was an incredible year. 2020 was not so much.
No, it goes back to Flight Simulator, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's very poor. We did one public display last year.
Wow, was that all?
Yeah, and I think in 2019 we did probably in the 50s or 60s, if not more than that.
Wow, I remember seeing us actually down in Dunsfold. I think it was the last ever Dunsfold. And,
yeah,
I remember seeing us doing a display there, and it was really, really good to watch, especially knowing that it was the last one in Dunsfold.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd enjoyed being at Dunsfold with the Hawks and the history of the place. That's where the Harrier was first test flown, and the Hawk was in fact first test flown. So there's a lot of history there. And then to know it's going to be a housing estate is it's pretty painful.
I always loved Dunsfold. I'm the same. My other half as well. She loves the Red Arrows. And that was the closest we had ever been to the Reds, when we're standing along the display line, and you guys are literally just the other side of the runway, and it was the first time where we could actually make out your white helmets as you went past, and the red suit in the cockpit. Yeah,
it was a great place to display.
It was really, really cool. So I just want to touch on the MBE, Mike. How did you come about being awarded the MBE and the fellowship?
That's a good question. So the MBE, I knew absolutely nothing about it. Genuinely knew nothing about it. It was Christmas Eve 2016, I guess. I was actually with my missus. We were walking to the pub to meet some mates Christmas Eve. I'd had a missed call from my boss at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock Christmas Eve, and who calls? Boss doesn't call at 5 o'clock on Christmas Eve, so I ignored it. Then he rang again. I thought, I better answer this. Something important's happening, I think. So I answered it, and we were probably 50 yards from the pub, and he said, "You sitting down?" No, boss. I'm walking to the pub, and he said, I just want to tell you that you've been awarded the MBE in the New Year's honours list. Oh, blimey! But you can't tell anyone. Like, what? You can't tell anyone because you obviously it gets announced on New Year's Eve, and no one's allowed to know before that point, but apart from the recipients. So you're sworn to secrecy. So I walk into this pub with a massive grin on my face. I can't tell anyone anything. What's wrong with you? Oh, nothing. It's just Christmas. I'm just happy. Obviously, I told my missus and my folks, but. Yeah, I mean, just what an honour. And that was for services to Red Arrows. I was doing a job I love, and a job I'm very passionate about, and they gave me a gong for it. So yeah, very grateful.
Amazing. Like I said at the start, it's what a career. It's just and you keep adding to it. Which brings me on to the next bit, which is why I want to touch on the MBE now, because most people ask, what is the pinnacle of a career? And yourself, you've done the Red Arrows and everything, but it's you. I don't even know how to describe it. You soloed a Spitfire. Right?
Yeah, so I keep saying that 2020 was a bad year, but it was in the majority. But there was one thing that happened, which was got to fly solo in a Spitfire, which is utterly magical. It really is. It's so my two schoolboy dreams. One of them was to be a Red Arrows pilot and display at the Biggin Hill Air Show. Which that's something I wanted to do since I was 3 years old. But then growing up in Biggin Hill, every year or every air show, it was closed by a chap called Ray Hanna, who was a founding member of the Red Arrows. So he was a founding member in 1965. He then became leader for 4 years after that. So very well known, amazing pilot. He then became a very accomplished warbird pilot after his time in the military, and flew this Mark 9 Spitfire MH434 and did the most jaw-dropping display to close the air show every year. And it was a tribute to the Battle of Britain pilots. It was done to music. It was just, you could have heard a pin drop in the crowd. I'm getting hairs on the back of my neck now talking about an event I was witnessing 40 years ago, 39 years ago. But watching him do that was my other dream, was to be a solo Spitfire display pilot at Biggin Hill. So 2009, I got to realize the first one. I'd been in the Red Arrows a year. We couldn't display at Biggin Hill in my first year because we were in America, as we talked about. So it was the following year when I was synchro and got to display at Biggin Hill. So that was tick, job number one. And then the next one was for me to get in a Spitfire. So obviously, small steps. You've got to be able to fly the thing first before you can display it. And very, very fortunate to have had a go in that last year.
I was going to say, even getting to fly in one is a massive thing. So how did it come about that you were offered the front seat effectively?
It was, I tried a couple of times to join the Battle of Britain Memorial flight while I was in the Air Force, unsuccessfully, of course, because I would have been doing that otherwise. But I didn't get the job, partly because I was still in the Red Arrows, partly because I probably wasn't the best man for the job. But I was quite disappointed by that, because that was the one thing that I really wanted to reach for, having done the Red Arrows stuff. From a selfish point of view, I wanted to now go and do the Battle of Britain Memorial stuff with those very important aeroplanes that they keep in the hangar there. But I've always been passionate about warbirds, well, any aeroplanes, of course, but particularly warbirds. And there is something about the Spitfire, how iconic it is, how amazing it looks, how amazing it sounds, how much everyone loves it. It is a national icon. And I wanted to get into the world of warbird flying. I hadn't done anything about it proactively, really. Got to know the guys, our neighbours at Sywell, where we're based with the Blades at Sywell. There's a Spitfire outfit there called Air Leasing, which is run by a chap called Richard Grace, who flies or owns and operates the Grace Spitfire, which was incredible story about this Spitfire. It was the first Allied aircraft to shoot down an enemy aircraft on the 6th of June, 1944 over Normandy. So it's from that point of view, it is a incredible pedigree. It then actually went to the Irish Air Corps as a trainer after that. And then it then got bought by Richard's father in the 80s. sadly, after he refurbished it, he was killed in a motor accident.
Oh, my dad actually saying that it was a great. I didn't realize this was a great Spitfire. My dad did a lot of skydiving in Goodwood, and it was based down there. And he used to help this guy clean the Spitfire and sit in it and everything. And my dad actually said he was with him that morning, and he said, "Oh no, I'm not going to fly today. The windsock's all over the boat." And it was on the way home that my dad was saying that he was tragic.
Oh blimey! Oh wow! Yeah. Oh, it's it's a tragic story. But what came out of that was so Nick's widow Carolyn learnt to fly the Spitfire to display it in Nick's memory, and now their son has taken the mantle, taken it on, and is operating the business. Anyway, so we got to know each other through being neighbours at Sywell and operating on the display scene together. We've known each other for a number of years, and he just rang me up one day and said, "You got a minute for a chat?" So I went over for a chat, and he said, "How would you like to fly my Spitfire?" Oh, my jaw just hit the ground. This was just, I thought he was joking, pinch me. So yeah, I got the opportunity and did 5 or 6 conversion trips with an instructor in the back. I did 2 in the back seat, just observing almost, which in itself is, an opportunity that it just, a pinch yourself moment. And then jump in the front, instructor in the back. Richard then jumped in the back for one of these trips. We landed off the trip and he said, "Right, how do you fancy going on your own?" Okay. He jumped out, I taxied around and off I went. And then he got on the radio in the tower. First solos are normally just a circuit. I got airborne thinking I was going to turn downwind for a circuit to land. He jumped on the radio in air traffic and said, "Oh, mate, take it away for 10 minutes and do some aeros." So I did. It was a beautiful Northamptonshire, really still summer's evening in September. And I went and just flew at my aero sequence in the Spitfire 500 feet over Northamptonshire. Just amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Was there moments where you're sat there by yourself, inverted in a Spitfire, looking out at this elliptical wing where you just wanted to pinch yourself and be like, "Oh, I'm going to wake up any second"?
The whole flight. Yeah, all 15 minutes of it. It was just exactly that. I'm just am I really doing this? And unfortunately, because of the way that things have worked with COVID and other bits and bobs, I've only done one solo in it. So that was towards the end of the summer. It's now in quite heavy maintenance over the winter. So the opportunities for flying it have been nil. So I'm kind of hoping that in the next couple of weeks, they're going to wheel it out of the hangar, do its post-maintenance test flight, and then give me a call to come and get current on it again.
That would be so cool. So are you going to be flying passengers in it and everything?
Yeah, so that's the idea, is that they operate as Ultimate Warbird flights. So if you type in Ultimate Warbirds into Google, it'll come up with that website. And they operate a fleet of 2-seat Warbirds. So they've got a Spitfire, they've got a Mustang, a P-51 Mustang, and a Bouchon, which is the sort of Spanish version of the Messerschmitt 109. They're all 2-seaters. They're all dual controlled, so you can actually fly them from the back seat yourself as well. And they offer passenger rides in those. They've also got Tiger Moth, which was quite nice to fly in the summer as well, just to get in the back of a Tiger Moth. And yeah, that's exactly what I'll be doing in the summer, is outside of the Blaze stuff, when I've got some spare time, just hop over the airfield and jump in the front of the Spitfire, give someone a passenger experience in the Spitfire or the Tiger Moth, and then go back to the day job.
So cool. I remember actually talking about that Spitfire. I did a lot of competition flying for the UK national microlight team, and we were going down to the Isle of Wight where we were doing a Fronglaze competition, and Paul said he's in Flylight, which is the other side of you guys, I think.
Yep.
And he said, "Oh, we'll jump in, taxi round, and we'll grab some fuel." So at the same time as we were taxiing, the Spitfires pulled up. So we shut down. I jump out anyway, and the guy's like, he's like, "Oh, I'm really sorry." I was like, No, you take your time. I said, "Because I've never ever taxied up to a fuel pump before, and I just let a Spitfire go first."
It's amazing. And Sywell is incredible for that. It is like a pilot's Disneyland. On a beautiful day in the summer when there's no COVID restrictions, it is. There are families having picnics at the airfield. There's a restaurant there. There's a cafe there. There's a bar there. And there's all these Warbirds operating. You've got the blades displaying. You've got helicopters flying in and out. There are World War I replica aircraft there as well. Other aerobatic aeroplanes. So it's such a great place to be. And I don't know if you've ever been to the hotel and the restaurant there.
I stayed in it. It's lovely.
Yeah. So it's all done. The aviator's done out like an Art Deco type aviation theme. In fact, the restaurant was opened by Douglas Bader back in the 70s.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, actually, and there's a plaque in the restaurant that says opened by Douglas Bader. So this place is steeped in aviation history, and it is like a pilot's Disneyland. So if you got a nice day in the summer and coronavirus restrictions allow, then definitely do a land away to Sywell for an overnight, couple of beers, and a nice meal.
I definitely have to put that on the agenda. I remember coming back from that. Talking about like it's like Disneyland for pilots. I remember coming back from that competition, and we were quite early in the morning, and we joined overhead in the Sky Ranger, and I could see your guys' aircraft lined up. The other side, I could see it was a Spitfire, and there was something else up, so it could have been the Mustang. Down the other end, there was a couple of big helicopters doing some stuff.
Yeah,
and it was just mad coming in overhead and thinking, oh wow, look what I'm rubbing shoulders with.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
I take my hat off to you, Mike. You've really done really well there, and I'm quite jealous of it.
Oh, I do. I still pinching myself now, and the Spitfire grin as I put on Twitter. Every time I think about it and talk about it, I've just got a ridiculously childish grin on my face. So now working up to the display authority. So obviously we've got it in the extra. But it's a different type of display authority for warbirds. So because of the power difference. So hopefully, if the air show scene is going to be happening this year, then fingers crossed I might be displaying a Spitfire.
That would be so cool. What
I still can't believe I say that. Yeah, it's amazing.
So every time you said the word Spitfire, a grin has just appeared.
Exactly. No, it's the Spitfire grin. Yeah, it's impossible to get rid of it.
So Mike, you also do a lot of charity stuff. Can you tell us about the charities that you do stuff with?
Yeah. So through day job, through the Blades, I'm involved with the RAF Benevolent Fund. They are the heart of the RAF family, where they support all members of the RAF, be them serving veterans, cadets, family members of RAF personnel, and just supporting them in any way they can. Really amazing charity. It helped me out when I was in my wheelchair after my accident. Actually, I needed an electric wheelchair because of both my knees and my arm. I couldn't use a normal wheelchair, otherwise I'd just go around in circles with only one arm operating. So I got an electric one, and it was the Benevolent Fund who got me that. So I'm very grateful to them. So we do a lot of work through the Blades in supporting our charity partner, the RAF Benevolent Fund. But then I'm actually the patron of two charities, which I'm very proud to be. Unfortunately, the last year I've not had the opportunity to really get involved too much. But the first one is a charity called Fly to Help. They're based at Gloucester Airport, which I've been working with them through the Red Arrows for a number of years. They're set up by pilots for inspiring other people, so people who might have disadvantages through whatever it might be, underprivileged, terminally ill children, terminally ill adults, just through the wonder of flight, giving them opportunities to give some inspiration and a little bit of ray of hope. And they're called Air Smiles experiences, and that's what this charity operates. But on the sideline, they've got another angle, which is Aim High, which is inspiring youngsters into, or showing them what fields of aviation there are available, and using the charity to promote aviation among the younger community. Really amazing charity, run by only a couple of people down at Gloucester, but they try and get everywhere and do what they can. So a challenging year or two for the charity, and hoping it starts picking up for them, because they do such a good job. The other charity I'm proud to be a patron of is a Biggin Hill based charity. So the Nick Davidson Memorial Flying Scholarship, back in 2011, Nick Davidson was a British Airways pilot who had been an instructor at Biggin Hill, sadly passed away from terminal cancer, and in his will he said, I want to donate a flying scholarship to get a youngster through their PPL. So it was going to start off as just one gesture, but his widow then said, well, no, let's make this an annual thing where we give a scholarship to a youngster. And that's been going on for a few years now. So proud to be the patron of both. As I say, I'd like to get involved more when the circumstances permit. But if your listeners could have a look at the Nick Davidson Memorial Flying Scholarship and Fly to Help, would be fantastic.
Perfect. I'll pop links into description and stuff to them as well. Mike, thank you so much for your time. I've absolutely really enjoyed, and I hope the listeners have as well, of listening to your whole amazing career. And like you said, it just sounds like it's going to get better and better. Well, as I said, it's a fighter pilot talking about flying in himself, so it's a very happy place to be, and I'm very, very
proud and grateful for the opportunities I've been given. You know, that's it doesn't just happen. People have given me opportunities, certainly from the Air Force perspective, putting me in the right place at the right time, the Blades for giving me the flying they've given me, and now Richard and his outfit for letting me fly their priceless heirloom in the Spitfire. So yeah, I'm very grateful and very proud, and loving the aviation life is definitely the way forward.
Hopefully you get that PDA on the Spitfire this year, and we'll be seeing you doing displays everywhere in the Spitfire in months to come, hopefully.
I've got my fingers crossed.
So have we. Mike, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure. Thanks, Mikey.
Have a good one.